We have an amazing guest for you tonight. Christopher Dunn has had an extensive background as a master craftsman. He was recruited by an American aerospace company where he has worked at almost every level of high-tech manufacturing. Then he decided to pursue something else. And over the years, he has been investigating the Giza pyramid area in Egypt. He has written several books, The Giza Power Plant, and also Lost Technologies of Ancient Egypt. Chris, welcome to the program. Good to have you with us.
Thank you, George. I appreciate being here.
How do you think they cut the stone?
Well, that's an interesting question because one of the pieces of evidence that I discovered in 2006 and included in my book, Lost Technologies of Ancient Egypt, describes them using circular saws.
Circular saws?
Circular saws.
How big?
Well, the evidence clearly shows that the saw must have been over 37 feet in diameter.
A 37-foot saw?
Yes.
My God, and they had to have had something to power this thing.
Yes.
And the revolutions to cut through that kind of stone must have been astronomical.
Well, not necessarily the revolutions, but I mean, even at a slow revolution, the surface feet per minute at the cutting edge of the saw would be sufficient. I mean, you wouldn't have to turn it very quickly.
What would the material be to have constructed the saw?
Obviously, they would have had to have used a material that was harder than the granite, and what we look for
that's a big diamond if that's what
diamonds.
It was.
But I mean, they create saws today to cut granite, and they embed diamond in a substrate, and it cuts very, very efficiently. But it's a matter of saying, you know, if you have a mega project like building a pyramid,
right,
then you actually create mega machines to accomplish it, and that is kind of like a revolutionary concept in that we the picture that has been kind of transmitted to us over the years of how pyramids were built
just remarkable.
Have been people with, you know, these stone balls or chisels and, you know, just banging away at the blocks. But the evidence shows otherwise.
Where would a 37-foot circular saw be right now? Where would they put that?
It's a good question because when you consider the thousands of years since the pyramid was built, I mean, there are different scenarios that you can imagine. If the pyramid was completed, the people who have built it would take the saw, take it apart, because I'm assuming that something that large would come in sections,
right,
and you would assemble it on site
and take it apart.
Right, and then there's evidence on the Giza Plateau and at Abu Rawash. Abu Rawash has clear evidence of this 37-foot saw.
Clearly.
Clear.
Do other people see this, or just you, Chris?
I've seen it, and other people have seen it, and verified it. Other engineers, I've taken engineers to Abu Rawash and showed them to it. In fact, the two people that I took there looked at it, and read my analysis on it, and said, "Well, this is like a new Rosetta Stone."
It really is,
because it describes a culture that is much more advanced, and it's hard evidence.
The masonry techniques also were incredible.
Yep.
Bronze and copper tools of the time are at first sight too soft. Yet a sarcophagus or coffin makes it clear that ancient masons could cut straight edges. Close up, there are striations, marks made by the movement of a hard edge.
Yeah. That's it. Now the stone weights at each end of the saw are putting the load onto the sand and causes the cutting. The crystal is forced to score a groove in the stone.
So the copper is only guiding the sand's doing the cutting.
Right.
That's all well and good, Christopher, but that would take a lot of going back and forth to cut those blocks we see in the pyramids.
Yes, and that particular method does not explain the evidence, because the evidence indicates that the saw was moving through the material at a higher feed rate, and the striations on the stone with that method, you would not be able to move the saw through very quickly.
Might have been used for smaller blocks, maybe? Is that possible?
I mean, I think if
Or
you
just
have,
toss the whole theory
I
out?
think if you have the technology, if you have the technology to cut the stones and leave the striations on the large blocks that I've seen in Egypt, there's no reason for you to revert to a method like that to cut smaller blocks.
There's something in the Petrie Museum, some kind of granite core with spiral grooves. What is that all about?
That was a William Flinders Petrie discovered that at Giza in 1881, and he wrote a book called Pyramids and Temples of Giza. It was published in 1883, and he described this core as being tapered, and that the drill, whatever drilled it, it had a revolution, per revolution of the drill, it cut about 100 thousandths per revolution. So for every revolution down, it sank into the granite about 1/8 of an inch. And that is an amazing, tremendous feed rate.
It's great science, wasn't it?
Well, it would have been science, science, engineering, techniques, technology, but it's a very mysterious object. And at first, when I analyzed it, I thought that it may have been cut using ultrasonic machining, but since I received a latex impression of the outside of the core and examined the grooves in it, it is spiral, but it's almost as though it has parts of it have melted. That there was some application of heat or something like that.
Remarkable.
To assist in the cutting, but it's a very mysterious object for sure.
Christopher, what about the moving of the blocks? Even though it's remarkable that they may have had power saws,
Right.
how did they move these things? They're huge.
Well, that's one of the things that really, when we look at how the pyramids were built, and we look at how they moved obelisks and these massive statues, somewhere weighing 1,000 tons, how were they moved, and how do they build the pyramid? So in a short period of time, when some of the blocks weigh
Tons.
70 tons.
Tons, yeah.
And taking blocks to
We couldn't move them today.
Oh well, I mean, I wouldn't say that we couldn't if we had a purpose to do that. I mean, 200 tons. They've lifted 100-ton vessels, nuclear vessels to a higher
But the
elevation.
cranes were huge.
The cranes were huge, and there are people who specialize in lifting, crane drivers and what they call riggers who will analyze a site and determine, what they need to move a block from point A to point B. And the company I work for moved a 100-ton press into the plant, and so that was quite an ordeal, where they had to bring a crane down in sections on 5 semi-loads and then assemble
Just
it.
remarkable.
And so for 5 days they were bringing these pieces in, then assembling it, and then they actually picked the load and dropped it into the plant.
Do you think they had extraterrestrial help?
There has been it seems to have been a popular idea that people have attached to. I tend to think more along the lines of a more advanced civilization,
All right.
such as say our civilization.
That kind of technology.
Yeah, if we have, there is a lot, a lot of the technology that we see in Egypt, when it comes to cutting and shaping, we have the tools today to be able to do that. The lifting is another matter, and so while it's possible to do it, What the methods are, I think they used a more efficient method. I think they actually had levitation technologies,
I think so.
anti-gravity
Sound resonance,
technology.
something.
Yeah. Now, I don't want to escape your previous question on the extraterrestrial help. That idea, I have not seen any credible information that would prove it. And you know, it's hard when it comes to evidence and the analysis of evidence. We have to assume that this planet, the genius of the human race, is evident in all cultures throughout.
Sure.
Throughout history, whether you go back millennia, but civilization is cyclical, you know, and we go through cycles of the rise of a civilization and the fall of a civilization. For some reason, whether it's extraterrestrial impacts like a comet strike, which it seems like there's evidence for that now, it will destroy a large section of society, and sometimes throw the whole planet back in time. I mean, today, if it happened, we could be thrown back to being a medieval society.
They've written a number of books. Their latest is called Giza's Industrial Complex. Welcome, JJ and Desiree, to the program. Welcome back.
Thank you, George. Great to be here.
Always a pleasure.
You two may be the most sought-after couple I have ever come across. I'm curious, how did you two meet, JJ?
I was a young professor working with the Walt Disney Studios in college called California Institute of the Arts, and Desiree was my student, and she was able to keep up with me in art, science, and music.
And that's exactly when he had his unique experience that brought about his famous book, The Keys of Enoch. And so at that point, I understood what he was saying, and that brought us together. So it's been 73.
That's fantastic. And you have keyed in a lot on a lot of different things, but you specialize, would you say, on Egyptology?
Egyptology and also other sacred areas throughout the world. So we combine 9 different disciplines, from archaeology, sociology, psychology, to space science.
What's it like, JJ, to stand by the base of the pyramids and look up?
Overwhelming. You see a gargantuan system that is far beyond human comprehension at first. And I think this is why the great Greek thinkers, Homer went to Egypt, Pythagoras, the great mathematician, all of them had their schooling in Egypt. So it's really the great center of information that we're still trying to unravel.
I've been fascinated with Egypt since I was a little boy. My late father was born in Cairo. We're not Egyptian by any means, we're Lebanese, but that's where they were when he was born. And they stayed there for about 6 years before they came to the United States.
And Desiree's father, as a young medical student in Vienna, Austria, went down to Egypt in 1923, stood at the head of the Sphinx.
That's when my dad was born.
Even the paws were still under the sand. And so we've been involved as a family for 100 years in Egypt.
A lot of mystery. What do you think's going on in Egypt, JJ?
I think what we're seeing in Egypt, it's a model of information on all levels, of energy production, a library of ancient knowledge, a astrophysical gauge or computer of some level of mathematical magic connecting us with the stars. Everything in the realm of science, psychology, and spirituality is connected in the roots of consciousness with Egypt.
And you know, we were actually one of the founders of the Tomb of Osiris. And this is 100 feet down, almost in the center of the plateau. And this is what brought us to our latest book, Giza's Industrial Complex, because if you go that 100 feet down, you'll find a type of sarcophagus with 4 pillars around it, but it's also covered with water. So why would you ever put a dead body down with a lot of water? So this gave us the idea that maybe it was more than something of burial. Maybe it was a technology that they understood, and they needed the boxes like we use today with covering nuclear fuel to maintain that technology.
Interesting. And of course, digging down 100 feet, wouldn't the shifting sands just keep filling back in?
Well, these are called well shafts, and there's actually several on the plateau. You know, people look at the three pyramids, but in addition to that, there's queen pyramids, there's a lot of well shafts, there's other sarcophagi around, there's a whole mastaba area. So it's a huge complex, and that's why we call it Giza's industrial complex. We're not just looking at the Great Pyramid. It's a complete area of technology, we believe.
And you believe the pyramids are power sources, don't you?
Correct. Power sources and chronometers, which means time measuring devices. And we are members of the American Hydrogen Energy Society. We've lectured with specialists throughout the world. And many of our colleagues believe, as we do, that the pyramid represents a mechanism through which hydrogen can be produced.
Is it a machine?
Yes.
Well, we also think that there's aspects of initiation, so we don't want to throw that out. We also acknowledge the alignment to stars like Orion, or we'll say the area of Alpha Draconis, the circumpolar Aries Thuban. But in addition to that, hydrogen probably was used. Now, hydrogen is a #1 fuel throughout the whole universe.
Right.
And all you have to do is take water and break it down. High school students can do this. And I believe we're at the verge of a new hydrogen economy. So right now we're using a lot of battery technology like the Teslas, but the next phase that Europe and other countries are coming out with will be a hydrogen technology.
Christopher Dunn believes also that the Giza power plant is exactly that. Let's look.
What are the chambers like inside the pyramids? Because
Well-
they have these little long tubes of chambers and things. What are they doing? Where are they going?
Well, that's one of the unique features of the Great Pyramid, are those what you call tubes. Specifically, if you talk about the Queen's Chamber in the Great Pyramid, that has these tubes that are going up on an angle but don't exit the pyramid. That was one of the mysteries. And there are two of these shafts that go up on the north side and the south side of the chamber.
How long are they?
I'd say about 200 feet
Wow.
long.
By what?
But they don't
Couple
exit.
feet?
They don't exit. No, they're only about 8 inches square.
That's it.
Yeah. And then in the King's Chamber, you have two shafts. One is about 8.4 inches wide by 4.8 inches high, and that shaft goes to the north. And then on the south side, you have a large opening in the wall that looks like a catcher's mitt, like a horn antenna.
Could they have carried water or mercury or anything like that?
Well, I mean, any conduit can carry any solution you put in it, but
Sure.
the question was that the reason? They have been, I think, incorrectly labeled air shafts.
Uh-huh.
But the problem with that is, particularly with the Queen's Chamber, they wouldn't have carried any air because they were closed. So why did they exist? And that's what I address in my book. The Giza power plant is what the purpose of those shafts is.
And exactly what do you think it was?
Well, if you take the whole pyramid and all the features within the pyramid, and I actually created a scenario where the Great Pyramid is in harmony or resonating with the Earth and drawing energy through it. That
Right.
energy is then transferred into airborne sound. The power center is the King's Chamber, and it's constructed out of granite, thousands of tons of granite. And then the Queen's Chamber was where they created a hydrogen with two solutions coming in from the north side and the south side. They mix and they create hydrogen.
Remarkable.
And there's evidence to support my theory. I think we've talked in the past about the Gantenbrink's door, where they found those.
That's the one they drilled through?
Yes, exactly. And so there's more information on that, I think, that was revealed in 2011.
What do you both feel about Christopher's?
I think Christopher is right on target. We were there in the 1970s, and we collected samples of the salt crystals inside the Queen's Chamber, what is called calcium carbonate, calcium sulfur, sodium chloride, salt, And we gave this to our late colleague, Patrick Flanagan. Dr. Flanagan analyzed this with specialists in Arizona, and they came up with the conclusion this material could have been produced by hydrogen activity.
Now, we would alter a little bit the structure that he defined here. We actually would put the water coming in from underground because the tomb of Osiris is full with water. There's something about the Giza Plateau. It sucks literally water underneath. It's just an amazing thing. It's almost like a hydro pump.
In the desert.
In the desert. No, there's water all the way going up. And that's why even the tomb of Osiris fills up. And it's quite far from the Nile. And of course, years ago when there was the, before the Aswad Dam, now the water levels were higher all over the Nile Canal area. But basically, so we believe water came from underneath, came up, and then it's so simple with just a slight energy technology to separate that water into hydrogen gas. Now, there's one new theory that's also come out that ties in with our co-writer. We have a co-writer on the book named James Brown. He's a contractor, and so he knows a lot about building, and that is the fact of using maybe lasers. Now, I know lasers sound very odd for people going back, 4,000, 5,000 years, that people laugh at that. However, but there's a new working theory for fusion. Now, this is a great technology. This is not fission that gives you all the pollution, but this is fusion. And they're using hydrogen and boron. Now, boron was available in Egypt, and hydrogen is what we're talking about. If you pulse it, you pulse that energy, you will get fusion, you'll get a reactor going. And I believe, and so does our colleague, the Grand Gallery was that place for that reactor.
Chemical laser.
Now, we believe hydrogen gas was made and used all over most of the temples of Egypt.
What did they use this for?
Well, that's always a very big question. So obviously not everyone had an electric light bulb. They didn't drive cars like we would do today because we really should be using it.
They didn't have their computers.
Right, so they didn't need it. But what they did use it for was the priest and the royal family.
As well as the artist.
And the artist. So what they can do, like the Dendera light bulb, right? You can use a gas to light. And we know that when Dr. Attack said the artist, it's because if you go underground, you'll find a lot of the details on these tombs and chambers. You can't even use mirrors to get the light down into them. And there's no soot on the wall. So how did they do this beautiful art in the lower chambers if they didn't have some sort of light? Now, Eric Von Daniken has shown that you can take that Dendera light bulb that you see on the wall and make a light bulb like that.
We actually saw this demonstrated in the year 2000 in Vienna, Austria, where we had anthropologists and researchers from all parts of the world looking at the interesting artifacts of Egypt, as Desiree has just explained, from Dendera, where you see pre-scientists sitting under these two flasks, lighting, as it were, like a neon light, suggesting the Egyptians had the ability to create certain gases, light sources, that enabled them to put together a vast labyrinthian system of tunnels and canals under the complete Giza plateau. So this is the great complex of Giza that we're talking about for energy production, for the training of scientists throughout the ancient Middle East, like Pythagoras and others, as well as leaving behind time capsules of information that Russian scientists believe connect us with distant galaxies.
How did they know this technology? I mean, who taught it?
Well, of course, if we go by the Egyptian records themselves, like the German philologist Chris Sethi wrote, in terms of the Egyptian cosmic heritage, the gods, the imperishable gods from Orion, or Imsak, the Egyptian word, from the Stargates of Orion, from the 3 stars in the belt of Orion, somehow have the ability to transmit this information metaphysically to the mind and the Egyptians, or a earlier society of pre-scientists were able to translate this into physical form.
Desiree, you think so too?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I'd like to go on a little bit about the hydrogen technology, what else they could use it for.
Sure, absolutely.
Plutarch, a very famous historian, wrote that in the temple of Jupiter Ammon, which is perhaps even on the border of Libya, that they had a light that would never go out. They call it one of the eternal lights, that even with rain or wind, it would never go out. And we believe that's what you see in what's called Brown's gas, which is a slight alteration from the hydrogen splitting.
To the HHO.
It's HHO. So you can have this very powerful acetylene torch. That's really, it's cold almost to the touch around it, but it's so powerful it can cut through, sheets of steel. So that's one aspect. Now, also Eagle Research, who talks often about new technologies, mentions that even hydrogen, this HHO especially, you can actually drink it because it's negative ions and it actually makes you healthy. So we are not into healing. I'm not telling everyone to go out there and go do it.
Drink your hydrogen,
Yeah,
right?
no. Well, the HHO in particular, which is Brown's gas, has been known. It's actually a hexagonal shaped water, like Jerry Pollack has come out with, if you've heard about the work he's done. And basically, people have taken it in and said it's, or even just put it on their bodies, it heals wounds. So I'm not into healing, telling people what to do, but there's a lot of benefit. Also, agriculture. Agriculture was known, for the Egyptians. I mean, people came to Egypt to get the agriculture. And if this water, even with hydrogen, we use hydrogen today in agriculture. That's one of our mainstays.
Absolutely. We use it in cars these days. Toyota loves it. Let's take a look. Isn't that better technology, JJ, than electric cars, for example?
Definitely. We were in Japan in 2011 with Professor Omasa, and he was the one who came up with the breakthroughs for the hydrogen fuel cell. We also were with Professor Winter in Germany, who came up also with the breakthrough for hydrogen to be applied to the truck fleets of Germany. And so we're at an amazing time in future science and engineering where we're going to go more and more into the hydrogen field, knowing that the safety situation has been established.
Right, and Europe is just about to make statements on moving to a hydrogen economy. And I have actually a friend in Santa Barbara who has a Mirai. And, there's only a few hydrogen fueling stations right now, but California is committed to putting in over 100. And, what's interesting is there's a big cost in this, and if you have to transport hydrogen, then it actually takes a lot of money, right? Because you're driving the gas, even if it's condensed to long distances. But what they're starting to do, including Shell Oil, is they're putting a little generator right next to the gas station. So basically, they're not even having to bring it in. They can actually generate it right there. And that's why it's taken so long to get out there, because there's companies like Millennial Rain Energy out of Ohio that says, you can buy one of these things, you can put them in your backyard, and the companies don't want to do that. They want to have you still grid tied, so to speak, to the technology. So this is one of the aspects, but we're very positive. Right now, batteries are more competitive than hydrogen, but if there were only 100 gas cars on the road, the price of gas would be really high too. So let's get thousands of hydrogen cars out there. Let's get the hydrogen being generated, not for blue energy, but green energy. Blue energy is where you use fossil fuels to generate it, coal, natural gas. But green hydrogen is where you use water. And this is what we think the ancient Egyptians had done.
So we have oil, gas, coal, but now the idea of using water as a vertical smokestack, so to speak, eliminating all of the pollutants is something that we believe goes all the way back to Egypt.
And they've been able to do, this is from Stanford University, Professor Dye has shown that you can use salt water. See, we can take the oceans of the planet and we can use it.
The ocean is a battery.
And the Egyptians had saltwater batteries, so that's the other aspect that we take beyond Chris Dunn. We understand that the Egyptians had other energy models.
You know, we're very pro solar and wind, but one of the big problems with solar and wind is storing. You can't store the energy.
You don't have a capacitor enough to store.
Exactly. And so, you know, obviously the batteries, they've tried that, the lithium batteries, but actually the saltwater battery holder, which has been developed by several companies, is also another potential. I mean, it's incredible. And even using some, goes back to Egypt because that's kind of what we're talking about. There's something called Quidnet Energy Company, and they're using the old oil shafts to store the compressed hydrogen or water in there to be able to store the energy.
So the Egyptians had storage facilities underground. And in our work with ground penetrating radar, is also remote sensing with colleagues from Stanford Research Institute, we saw, as it were, a handshake. That looking from above and looking from below, we were able to realize the Egyptian had the ability to sequester hydrogen at a very early period.
How did they have this kind of knowledge? Was it given to them from extraterrestrials?
Well, we're part of a cosmic mind, as it were. Consciousness is throughout the universe. And as we know, our human mind is connected with every mind on planet Earth. We are global minds interconnecting. And we realize that this doesn't stop with Mother Earth. We are connected with our genetic code with cosmic oscillations, what we call cosmic intelligence.
But we do believe, you know, and we're not talking about how the pyramid was built. That probably was...
That's another show
yes,
all by
another
itself.
show. But that probably was ET technology. So we believe in a sense that they came to give early civilization a boost, and this technology, and it really was from way before. We go back with Robert Schoch to the idea that the Sphinx is much older, you know, probably even a different environment.
And
even
there's some kind of storage area at the base of the Sphinx, as Edgar Casey had said, a hall of records.
Well, we were with the team that actually went down with the ground penetrating radar.
There's something there.
And we were able to discuss the fact that there seemed to be a cavity that was there, as well as towards the rear of the Sphinx.
Well, there are two holes around the Sphinx. One's on the side and one's literally in the middle of the back. Some people say about the head. I haven't gone up that high and I haven't seen any pictures of that. So there's a lot, and these cavities could have been dug out by, we'll say, you know, the 1800 explorers or something like that. But anyway, bottom line is, it's much more than just a pyramid. And Asclepius, which is an ancient Nag Hammadi text.
Coptic text tells us, and this is Hermes Trismegistus, which is an Egyptian deity figure, or we would call cosmic scientist, talking to Asclepius. Egypt, the most pious country in the world, has become the most impious. A land that was once full of temples has been now full of tombs. A land once full with gods has become a land filled with corpses. So it was there in the Asclepius Nag Hammadi text found in the 1945-47 area of recent archaeological discovery that speaks of the gods that were there in Egypt.
Now, this technology, this hydrogen technology, had to be used for more than just light. There's something else they had.
No, exactly. So agriculture, I have to say, we use a lot of hydrogen today. Unfortunately, not green hydrogen, but it's used and mixed with nitrogen for a lot of our agriculture all over the world.
As what, fertilizers?
Yes, it's necessary. So they used it, I believe, for agriculture, which was a necessary commodity at the time to get the civilization up and running and going. And we talked about also the health benefits of HHO, which is Brown's gas.
And also through the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians were the great masters of navigation for the Egyptian Empire.
The modern-day Syrians?
Modern-day Lebanese people.
Lebanese and Syrians,
And they had brought out information through even the New World. We have found Phoenician cargo buried off the coast of Brazil in the Atlantic. We have found evidences also of Phoenician areas up the delta of the Mississippi, something recently understood privately by some archaeologists who have found the gold ingots that were used later in Egypt.
Truly remarkable. JJ, a lot of people think that the Great Pyramid is a result of Atlantis, a tie-in there. What do you think about that?
Yes, I feel that there is a higher connection with an earlier civilization. Some call it Atlantis, others call it Altea. We believe that there is a definite relationship between Egypt as a central focal point to 12 other civilizations, Atlantis being one.
I had a chance to interview film director Carmen Bolter about her recent Atlantis discoveries. Let's take a look.
And what we're finding all over is beings that are giant, and the bones and distended skulls.
Yeah.
All over. Bolivia, all over. And so,
The Nephilim?
well, and I think that can be a catch-all because, who did it? The Anunnaki. Well, Anunnaki, Nephilim.
Right.
Who did it? Aliens. Who did it? The Anunnaki. Well, that doesn't, that doesn't go in depth. We could just sit here and go, the Anunnaki did it, the Anunnaki did it, right? It doesn't explain much.
Whoa, who's that?
Okay, so this is Giza, the giant. And so we started with photographs of a distended skull of an 8-foot 6-inch being from Bolivia. And Marcia Moore has recreated by using a 3D program called Mudbox.
Yeah.
And she's putting together what this being may have looked like. And I've called her Giza.
Well, she looks human.
And she's got the distended skull, and she's a giant. So she's just working on her eyes now to make her real. But we're recreating a real 3D model that will move and speculating about what this being could have been.
Almost 9 feet tall.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah, and there's some that are even taller than that. But this becomes part of the storyline of, and that would have been normal, in Atlantean times, perhaps, before the disaster that made that exceptionally rare.
Elongated skull. Is she human or extraterrestrial?
Well, that's always going to be an issue. Like I keep saying, aliens, Anunnaki. I mean, aren't we all starseed? Like,
Yeah, we are.
Where did it start? And, I think we get this misnomer that we're all running around in our vehicles, scooters, whatever, and we think that, extraterrestrials have to have a ship. But I think that the beings can be, channeling through us, and they didn't necessarily need to be, in ships, right? So the extraterrestrials is something, again, I think that these terms and the way they're used have been confusing us more than giving us information.
Clearly, though, she had an elongated skull,
Yes,
based on what I could see.
And what that would do is give more room for the pineal gland. And the pineal gland is the connection to spirit and all the psychic nature and that sort of thing. And so when we don't really understand the abilities that they had to create the technology, to bilocate, teleport, all that sort of thing, we're not used to that because we're in a dumbed down state with a smaller pineal gland that's even getting less useful to us because something like fluoride can calcify it.
She's onto something, isn't she?
Yes, she is. Our mutual friend in Austria, Klaus Dona, has collected samples of these elongated skulls from all over the world. We've had the opportunity to work with Jaime Gutierrez, a famous architect, anthropologist in the country of Colombia, and he has actually shown us physical samples of elongated skulls. So we know that this phenomena is a taste of a much earlier area of anthropology.
Yes, and the Egyptians clearly had on their wall, painting, so to speak, these elongated skulls.
They did.
So they actually definitely communicated with them, that they were shared intelligences with us. And we do believe that they came from an extraterrestrial reality. We agree with her, though, somewhat, that we also think we're extraterrestrial and we just can't remember where we came from.
We've been seeded, probably.
Yeah. And so, we've been here for a while, and therefore we don't remember our origins. But bottom line, we also don't have to always come in a physical spaceship. I like how she said that. We can actually just materialize and dematerialize. I think this is what sometimes alien beings do from time to time as well. So
this suggests a whole new paraphysics of hyperdimensional experience. What we're saying is we need a new textbook of biology and understanding of evolution. We would call it the higher evolution,
Right.
that we're one subset of others who have mastered time-space navigation.
So the Keys of Enoch, which is Dr. Hertak's main book, talks about the fact of how the pyramids align to Orion. And why is Orion important? Well, we believe it was the place for higher intelligence. If you go back to also the original Book of Enoch, which is an ancient Ethiopic book, it talks about the giants who were many ells, they call it E-L-L-S, ells, high. They were actually even higher than 8 feet. They were probably like some of the statues that you find in Egypt, literally
course,
20 feet,
absolutely.
even more.
12 to 14 feet high.
Well, the Nephilim were giants, weren't they?
Exactly.
When you read the biblical...
the Nephilim that were expelled, we would call them the fallen programmers.
Yeah.
So we have to go beyond the nuances of ET or angel. We have to have a whole new cosmic vocabulary, realizing that there are Egyptian-type levels of civilization in space. In fact, this is very clear in my research with remote viewing and the realization there were pyramids on Mars. As you may or may not know, I was the first to release the actual pictures of the Mariner 9 probes of Mars, where you see these gigantic
You were the
gargantuan
guy.
pyramids.
You were the guy. Absolutely.
So putting two and two together with the myths of the Far East, Africa, the Americas, we realize that in the ancestry of the human race, there is a recognition that the pyramid is the basic building block of evolution. It's not localized on planet Earth. It extends into space, just like human intelligence. It's not localized on Mother Earth. It extends into space, Mother Universe.
I had heard that the pyramids could have been earthquake stabilizers. Is that conceivable?
Well, this is one argument that's been brought forth in the areas of massive earthquakes like we had in the area of Cairo in the 12th century. The pyramids were the most stable structures to survive. And I think it's also interesting that most of the historic records are put in the base of pyramids throughout the world. They represent, as it were, the time capsules of information. If you want to keep things safe, put it inside of a pyramid.
But you know, Zoser, which is one of the older pyramids that just got opened in Saqqara, if you look inside, it's amazing. You know, you think if it's just a burial tomb, that it would just have a couple channels, maybe some places for their families to die and be buried. But actually, there's chimney stacks. There's some unusual structures in there.
Chimney stacks?
Yeah, a bunch of chimney stacks, one central stack as well. It's very similar to what you would use in this technology. So I go back to Asclepius. You know, it was a place of the gods, not a place of tombs. There was never anybody found in any of the three main pyramids.
Was it a portal, some kind of travel device where you could get into it and zoom off to some other planet?
Well, I don't want to make science fiction seem like it's the 21st century reality.
Right.
But we've outstripped science fiction in the sense of realizing the Egyptians had mathematical relationships, star or astrophysical relationships far beyond our level of comprehension.
You both have done great research. Gaia's Ancient Civilizations worked on uncovering some new understandings of the pyramids. Let's take a look at how it ties into mathematics.
Let's track east from Giza. Let's go off to Cambodia, to Angkor in Cambodia. An amazing site, again, very much devoted to the investigation of the mystery of death. The very word Angkor actually has a meaning in the ancient Egyptian language. It means life to the Horus. And lo and behold, it turns out that Angkor, with its pyramidal monuments, Angkor lies exactly 72 degrees of longitude east of Giza. I do not believe that that is an accident or a coincidence. I think there's a deep and ancient connection. And what we're looking at in Angkor, because that site was continuously used by many later cultures, both Hindu and Buddhist, what we're looking at in Angkor is the latest incarnation of a much more ancient site, which, just like Giza, goes back into remote prehistory.
Could these precise calculations be spread across the globe and communicating a code? Is it possible this is what Nikola Tesla tapped into? Robert Bauval predicts this is the language of the future.
The way we read the universe is through mathematics and through its geometry. And through its mathematics and geometry, we need to know, slowly through our evolution, we begin to work out how triangles work, circles, ellipses, various shapes, and now work out the numbers, how they produce numbers. So having said this, the language that we as human beings will be communicating sounds a bit too science fiction, but I don't think we'll be talking English or Chinese in the next 2-3 centuries. Already we're using a different language using computers. I think we'll be talking mathematics in the sense that to get a pure idea out, to get a pure thought out and to structure it so that you understand exactly what I'm talking about, the shape, the size, the dimension, the weight, the speed, I'll have to number it, I'll have to put mathematics. The Great Pyramid is speaking that language, it's transmitting that language. It's a silent language, if you like, that needs to be read. We don't need Egyptologists, we don't need experts in hieroglyphs. It doesn't have hieroglyphs. We need mathematicians. We need mathematicians to read it. And that's one of the goals, is to tempt them to get into this. We've moved in a direction where we rely on external knowledge. We seem to think that the answer is out there and we look for it. Well, the answer may be inside us. I truly believe this. And therefore we need to rechange how we see ourselves and how we educate ourselves. I think what's interesting now is that science is beginning to sort of touch the frontiers of what you would call in general terms spirituality. We begin to realize that the universe is mental. It is a mental universe. And we need to think in different forms, not just purely classical science.
It's amazing these great minds, both of yours included.
Thank you.
They're good friends of ours, Hancock and Bevel, and the Keys of Enoch actually give a map of the world where there were 12 extraterrestrial cultures that contacted us thousands of years ago and gave us a language of proto-communication, which is mathematics plus acoustical physics or vibrations. George, what is interesting is we have discovered that acoustical physics plays a very important role in how the structure of the Egyptian stones were moved, put in place mathematically and musically. In fact, when we were doing research in the 1990s, I was able to intone certain ancient Egyptian Hebrew Aramaic mantras. And at that point, the Grand Gallery, the largest area inside the pyramid, lit up in golden light.
Just instant light.
Instant light after standing columnar waves were generated. And so this showed us that there was a biofeedback system built into the sound vibrations of the Grand Gallery and even in the King's Chamber. Certain mantras produce certain vibratory levels, raising consciousness and producing paraphysical events.
That's amazing.
We've been working with the top musicologists in the world, who work with Steven Spielberg, who have worked with the Academy of Arts and Sciences, and they now recognize that the Egyptians also were in tune with a higher astrophysical language of vibrations.
They understood frequency and resonance.
Well, we actually recorded sound in the King's Chamber, and instead of having just overtones, which are a popular term, it actually produced undertones, which brought your mind into an alpha frequency vibration. So you got into more of a state of meditation. And I and other friends at other times have seen literally the walls drop away and you feel like you're out in outer space. So that's all the mathematics that Beval was talking about that's coded into the pyramid, in addition to the pi and the phi geometry that's also encoded. And in fact, the entire plateau has a type of golden ratio, if you look at it in terms of all three pyramids. So there's a whole sacred geometry. And if we take it to some of the other grid points on the planet, which the Keys of Enoch talk about, you go to areas like Chichen Itza. Strange enough, we're talking about water going underneath. Underneath the main pyramid of Chichen Itza, you will find water.
Even pyramids underwater off the coast of Taiwan and Japan.
And the water must have something to do with it, right?
Exactly.
Exactly. Well, we think not only for the technology, but also for the energy and also for initiation. I don't want to throw out the point. It's really a triple use technology. You can get initiated because the water is also coated within your body. You're about 70% water.
Absolutely.
The pyramid,
fascinating,
in terms of its inner structure and chambers, relate, we believe, to the different energy circulatory systems of the human body. The blood circulatory system, the lymphatic, the heartbeat, for example, is monitored inside the echo patterns of the king's coffer, inside the king's chamber. We were able to do the music test in the 1990s, and we realized that the beats of the human heartbeat, 68 to 72 beats, is also matched by the patterns inside the coffer when a person is beginning to breathe and chant in a certain frequency. So in essence, the heartbeat of the human race is in the granite coffer, which is reddish, showing that we are in the reddish portion of the electromagnetic spectrum. So in terms of micromathematics and macromathematics, the pyramid is a blueprint of the human body in stone. It is the temple of the ancients. It is the blueprint of the future. It is the cosmic synthesis of all of the basic functions of life.
Desiree, how do people track your works?
Through our websites, we have keysofenoch.org and also futurescience.org.
Both of you are just fantastic. Thanks for being on Beyond Belief.
It's great, George, and keep being the beacon of light. The missing capstone is all of us working together as the consciousness raising the human race into the stars.
Absolutely. Fantastic minds, to be sure. The Great Pyramids of Giza, probably one of the greatest mysteries of all time. I'm George Noory, and thanks for watching Beyond Belief.